Hello everyone and welcome to another random video on the internet. Today we'll be talking about a topic that I thought was entirely original, but after searching it up on YouTube found that quite a few people have already discussed it. However, I still think it's worth talking about it some more, and I'll be doing my own thing with this story. I've only watched a minute or two of the other videos, and I don't know what people did with this scenario before me, so hopefully I can do this topic my own way and do it justice. Also, before you watch this video, I suggest watching my How Strong is Kushina video to get an idea of what she's capable of and what she can offer to Konoha. It will be irrelevant to the story that I'm telling here. Anyways, without any further ado, let's talk about a hypothetical alternate universe where Naruto's mother Kushina survived. First of all, let's establish the point where this story divulges from the original. I think a good place for that is when the QB tries to stab baby Naruto, and Kushina and Minato end up stopping the attack by sacrificing their own bodies in exchange. In this alternate timeline, we'll say that Kushina was too exhausted to react to the QB attack in time, and Minato ends up being the only one stabbed, but still manages to stop the claw before it can get to Naruto. Kushina would obviously be in shock at seeing her husband impaled, but with Minato comforting her, the redhead would calm down, even if just a little. From there, Minato says they need to seal the Nine Tails back into her to save her life and keep the power balance between the villages. Sadly, it's physically impossible for him to seal the entire QB in one go, but there is a way around that. He'll use the Reaper Death Seal to split the Nine Tails into two and then seal both halves into Kushina with the 8 Trigram Seal, giving her the full QB, but in 2 separate doses. And so, after a tearful goodbye to his wife and son, Minato does just that. Moments before passing away, the 4th Hokage tells his wife that she needs to master the QB's power in order to protect Naruto and stop the Masked Man. With one final I love you to his wife and son, Konoha's yellow flash, the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze, dies in his wife's hands. So immediately you can see that this has drastic implications on the story of Naruto. First of all, Naruto is not a Jinchuriki. I just don't see any reason for Minato to seal half of it into his own son and half of it into Kushina. Why do that? Maybe Naruto would grow up stronger with the Nine Tails inside of him, but his life would be way worse, and Kushina can already grow stronger in his place. She's only in her 20s and she still has a long time to improve, while Naruto would be hindered by the fox, tormented by it. Maybe sealing half the Nine Tails into him would have been a good backup if anything happened to Kushina, but is it worth making Naruto's life a living hell for that? And second, Kushina is alive. Naruto has a mother. He'll be raised by a loving parent. Kushina would be found by Hiruzen and taken to the hospital. She'd take a few days to recover and then tell the 3rd Hokage about the Masked Man. Unfortunately, Konoha does not have the capability to track or pursue him, but they would know he exists and they would be wary of him. Everyone would know that the Nine Tails attack was definitely not just a natural disaster as well. It was a planned attack with a clear culprit behind it. It's almost 100% certain that the attacker was an Uchiha too. The fact that a masked Uchiha attacked Konoha definitely wouldn't be kept secret. Danzo would see it as the perfect opportunity to further build hatred in the clan, and he would undoubtedly leak that information as soon as possible. Discrimination against the Uchiha clan would increase and suspicions would be thrown in their direction way more than normal. Danzo would still have them pushed to the outskirts of the village as well. Hate and resentment would only build up from there. Though I don't see Kushina being the type to accuse them. If anything, I think she'd try to support them, and I'll explain why a little later. But for now, the Uzumaki's close friendship with Sasuke's mom Mikoto would be a factor in her pro-Uchiha stance. I could also definitely see Mikoto being the one to comfort and support Kushina, helping her get over her sadness over Minato's death. Sadly, bringing up Minato's suspicions about the Masked Man being Madara Uchiha himself is not an option for Kushina, as Minato never shared that information with his wife. Meanwhile, Kakashi, having lost his teacher, would vow to protect his legacy by protecting his son and wife with his life. Whenever he's not on missions, he'd be watching over them from afar, patrolling around their home at night to make sure no one tries to do any harm and so on. I could also see him openly asking Kushina to tell him if she or Naruto ever need any help. Later down the road, I wouldn't even rule out the possibility of Kakashi becoming determined to be one of Naruto's teachers as the boy grows up, possibly even volunteering to be the captain of whatever Genin team Naruto is assigned to. Kushina's identity as the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki would remain hidden. It was top secret information before the attack originally, and it would remain top secret here as well. Danzo would have to be a lot more careful with what information he leaks this time around, seeing as the Jinchuriki is a very capable Kage-level kunoichi instead of just a newborn child. And even if Kushina being a Jinchuriki became public information, I see herself, Hiruzen, Kakashi, and by extension Guy as well standing up for Kushina, telling the villagers that they should be grateful that Minato and herself dealt with the Nine-Tails and protected Konoha by doing so. Either way, I see Kushina and Naruto living a pretty happy life overall. Most importantly, Naruto would have a much different upbringing. His mother and father's identity would be publicly known, the village would renown both of his parents as heroes who saved Konoha, Naruto would be loved and treated well by the villagers. He would also know that his father was the fourth Hokage who gave up his life to protect his village and family from a mysterious masked man. I see Naruto setting two goals for himself. First, follow in his father's footsteps by becoming a Hokage that surpasses all who came before him. And second, hunt down and get revenge on the masked man. When it comes to Naruto's power progression, he'd be way stronger than he normally was because 1. The Nine-Tails isn't there to hinder his ability to mold and control chakra. 2. Kushina would be there to train him. 3. Kakashi would have a personal interest to train the boy. 4. All the other Jonin in the village could probably help out too from time to time. And 5. Kushina would probably call Jiraiya out for not helping his godson and basically force him to train Naruto too, though she would keep a close eye on his dirtier antics and make sure Naruto doesn't pick them up. People heavily underestimate how talented Naruto was as well. I suggest watching my old Naruto grows retardedly fast video for the full details, but to give you a quick rundown, he mastered the multi-shadow clone jutsu better than anyone else in history in just a couple of hours at most, this jutsu being a forbidden S-rank jutsu. He mastered the Rasengan, a jutsu which took Minato, the unparalleled talent, 3 years to create and master. Kakashi states that with clones, Naruto can complete 20 years worth of training in just a week. In just a few days, Naruto grows from being massively weaker than Kakashi to being able to blitz and one-shot Kakuzu, who was beating Kakashi pretty handily before. Kakashi himself even admits that Naruto was already on his level at that point. Naruto masters Sage Mode than Jiraiya could in his entire lifetime in just a week. Kakashi states that Naruto has more talent and potential than Sasuke, and so on. Naruto has retarded levels of potential, which can now be exploited a lot easier without the Fox and with the new capable masters. Now, that's not to say he didn't work hard to achieve all those things, he absolutely did, but still, the amount of talent he has when being encouraged by others is insane. Then there's also the possibility of Kushina trying to teach him how to access the adamantium chains as well. To keep things simple, we'll say Naruto graduates from the academy at around the same age as he did originally, passing the exam with flying colors. Now, he did fail the exam a few times originally, but that was because he tried graduating early. That's why he failed a bunch of times, but was still the same age as Sasuke and the rest of his classmates. I see a lot of people getting confused about that. Let's say Kushina wants him to live out his life as a regular child and not become a full-fledged shinobi too soon, so she doesn't allow him to graduate early. So how strong would Naruto be here? Well, by now he would definitely know that his natural element is wind. He'd know a bunch of low to mid-level wind jutsu such as Gale Palm or Wind Bullets. He'd also be a lot better at taijutsu, probably far greater than what Sasuke was at the beginning of part 1, though still not quite on par with weightless Rock Lee. His speed and physical strength would be a lot greater as well. I could also see Kakashi training Naruto to resist Genjutsu with his Sharingan. In that department, he would probably surpass beginning of Shippuden Sakura, or at least be on par with her. Tree walking and water walking would be a joke at this point, and the regular clone jutsu would be child's play. Naruto would also know a few low to mid-level sealing jutsu. Remember, Kushina is a god when it comes to sealing jutsu. She could seal away the Nine Tails on the brink of death. She knows the Reaper Death seal. She taught Minato every single sealing jutsu he knows, including the 8 trigram seal, which was used to seal the Nine Tails into Naruto. The Uzumaki clan was so feared for their sealing jutsu that multiple nations united and sneak attacked them in order to prevent them from becoming too dominant in the world. When your sealing jutsu makes nations shake in fear, I think you're doing something right. Jiraiya also knows a few sealing jutsu, and he would be there to train Naruto as well, so Naruto would definitely know some decent to good seals by the time he's 12. I also think he might already know the Rasengan by now. I mean, he knows Minato was his father and Jiraiya was his father's master. He definitely asked Jiraiya to teach him everything his father knew. Kushina would probably also want to see Naruto carrying on his father's legacy in the form of a jutsu Minato himself created. I think Naruto would be able to use it properly with one hand as well, seeing as his chakra control would be way better than in canon. One thing I do not think Naruto would have attained by now are the adamantium chains. They're just ridiculously hard to master, plus it's uncertain whether Naruto even has the special chakra needed to unlock them. The biggest question when it comes to Naruto's skill set is whether he would have been taught the Shadow Clone Jutsu and the Flying Raijin. Both of these are jutsu that Minato used, but they're also dangerous because of how much chakra they consume. But Naruto, being an Uzumaki, has ridiculous amounts of chakra, and he was able to summon 2,000 Shadow Clones in just the first chapter without any help from the Nine Tails. Granted, it was with a mental lamp, but he can consistently summon a few dozen all throughout the series while being nerfed by the Nine Tails. If you didn't know, tailed beasts actually feed off of their Jinchurki's chakra, making them weaker. It was a pretty big plot point in the war, and Kurama even restored himself to full health by feeding off of Naruto's chakra after getting a large portion of his own chakra stolen. So Naruto has more than enough chakra to learn the multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu, and I think he would be taught how to do it. I mean, why not? It's one of Minato's signature techniques, and he's well suited to use it. Would he be told that the Shadow Clones can speed up training? Well, considering that he was told that by Kakashi in the original, and Kakashi is right there training him from time to time in the scenario, yeah, I think he'd know by the time part 1 starts. As for Flying Raijin, Naruto is already way too OP, so let's just say he didn't have enough time to learn it yet, mostly for plot. So that's the power and skill differences, but what about his mentality and personality? First off, he wouldn't cause trouble and pull pranks to get attention because being the son of the late Hokage, he would already get plenty of that. I also think that he'd definitely be a lot more cheerful and happy-go-lucky, seeing as he's not alone and isn't forced to live in a tiny apartment by himself, isn't forced to eat only cups of ramen, isn't forced to drink out-of-date milk, and isn't literally suffering from severe depression. Seriously, I do not understand how such a big part of the fandom just forgets how rough Naruto's childhood actually was. You may think he'd get a bit of an ego considering that he's undoubtedly OP for his age and he's loved by everyone and he has several high-level shinobi as his teachers, his father was the Hokage and so on, but I think Kushina and Kakashi would make sure he doesn't get cocky. The moment he tries to boast about something for the first time, Kushina would shut that down. Kakashi is also a good example of someone who's very strong yet humble. I think Naruto may have a little bit of an ego internally, but he'd be rather humble overall, even more so than in canon. Naruto would also be a lot smarter and a lot more intelligent. He definitely received top-tier education, and even if he's naturally a bit of an idiot, I think he'd be able to make great progress in terms of books and battle smarts. Though in exchange, he would probably lose a good chunk of his creativity and unpredictability. Also, sexy jutsu is not a thing here, there's no motive for him to invent it, and Kushina would shut the idea down instantly. She'd probably give Naruto a good scolding if he was ever dumb enough to mention or, God forbid, show it off to anyone. Finally, for his physical appearance, I don't see his face changing all that much, and his clothes would probably still remain the same. But this time around, Naruto would be eating way healthier food, training and working out a lot more. He'd be taller and more fit. Honestly, between that and his status and skill, I think the girls would simp over him more than they did over Sasuke. And speaking of Sasuke, the most interesting question of the video. Would the Uchiha clan massacre still happen? And here, I'm really not sure. On the one hand, the Uchiha clan is definitely facing way more resentment and hatred from the village, and on the other hand, Kushina, who in this version of events would definitely be one of the most influential people in the village, is supporting them. You may ask why, but just think about it. The masked man was intelligent enough to know when the nine-tailed seal would be at its weakest, skilled enough to locate Kushina, slip past the most powerful barrier available to Konoha, kill a bunch of Anbu, outplay Konoha's Yellow Flash, take control of the Nine-Tails, and battle Minato Namikaze, the man who was basically soloing wars by himself on even footing. No offense to the Uchiha, but is there anyone in their clan capable of doing that? And what would the motive be? They were living in Konoha just fine until the Nine-Tails attack, so why would they attack the village? There's simply no logical reason, and there's no way they'd do it for fun or something like that. Furthermore, it was just one Uchiha, not the entire clan. As a friend of Mikoto, Kushina would definitely know that many Uchihas are peaceful and great people. Are you really gonna blame the innocent wives, newborn children, nice old grandmas, and soldiers who've risked their lives to protect Konoha in times of war for the actions of a single man? Obviously not. So I actually see Kushina being very vocal with her support for the Uchiha clan as a whole, and by extension Guy and Kakashi would be as well, two pretty well-known ninja at this point. And here's another thing, back in her younger days Kushina was very vocal about wanting to become Hokage. Now that Minato's gone, there are only 3 suitable Kage candidates: Kushina Uzumaki, Orochimaru, and Fugaku Uchiha. Fugaku isn't in a position to become Hokage with the whole controversy going on, and Orochimaru definitely isn't becoming Hokage because he leaves the village shortly after Minato's death, and I don't think Kushina being alive would change that at all. But Kushina, being one of the heroes who saved the leaf and an extremely powerful shinobi in her own right, is a near-perfect Kage candidate. Seeing that Kushina is pro-Uchiha and that she is probably going to be in the next Hokage, the Uchiha might not come to the conclusion that they need to revolt so easily. And I'm sure many villagers have Uchiha clan friends. That alongside Kushina's status would probably be enough to convince many people to become pro-Uchiha as well. Overall, I just don't see Danzo being able to drive the Uchiha into a corner this time, with them having support from probably the future Hokage and from many villagers as well. Fugaku and the rest of the clan would see that while there are some villagers who dislike them, most sensible people are siding with the Uchiha, again including probably the future Hokage. So while the situation is still quite tense, I am inclined to believe that they would hold off on the revolt idea. This is huge. Itachi doesn't have to become a double agent and murder his family. Shisui is alive and well. Fugaku is alive and well. The whole clan full of powerful shinobi is alive and well. Sasuke doesn't get traumatized and has an actually good life. And on the topic of Sasuke, he'd eventually start training with Itachi and Shisui. Fugaku would probably give him more attention as well, seeing as he doesn't have to worry about a possible war between Konoha and the Uchiha clan. Sasuke would be way more skilled with taijutsu, fire style, genjutsu, intelligence, and so on. Though I see no reason for him to awaken the Sharingan just yet, he'd have to feel some intense emotion for that to happen, and since there's really not a lot of darkness in his life, there wouldn't really be a catalyst for that. Itachi would also not awaken his Mangekyo Sharingan, seeing as Shisui never dies here. It's also unclear whether he would contract the illness that he originally did. We can pretty certainly say that he got it after leaving Konoha, but nothing else is clear. Whether the illness was something he contracted or something he had all along and the symptoms only manifested when he left the village, we don't know. There's no definitive answer here, but let's say he got it because of the less healthy, more risky, adventurous lifestyle that he had in the original series after becoming a missing nin. So here, Itachi is fully healthy, but in exchange, he doesn't have his Mangekyo powers. Sasuke and Naruto would definitely become friends because their mothers are so close. And they would definitely be rivals too, sparring with each other, spending time together, often training together, and so on. They'd practically be brothers by the time part 1 starts. By extension, Kushina, Kakashi, and Jiraiya would grow closer to Itachi, Fugaku, and Shisui as well, further solidifying the Uchiha's decision to not start a revolt. And where there's a Kakashi, there's always a Guy to be found as well. Guy would definitely want to join in on this whole training group, and by extension, Rock Lee would also join in about a year before the start of part 1, becoming rivals with Naruto and Sasuke. At first, he'd be extremely weak compared to the two prodigies, but with hard work and dedication, he would manage to close the gap significantly, becoming as strong as he was in canon in only about half the time he took to do so originally, because he has very good training partners and even more motivation this time around, plus many more masters on top of Guy. But moving back to Kakashi, he could probably get some Sharingan training from Fugaku, Itachi, and Shisui as well. He'd become a lot more skilled with it and might even reawaken the Mangekyo. Remember, he got it back when he was a kid, but he had to train to reawaken it during the 2.5-year time skip between part 1 and Shippuden. Who's to say that he couldn't achieve this a lot earlier with the help of 3 extremely experienced Sharingan masters, 2 of whom have the Mangekyo themselves? It's really not a stretch to say that he could do it toward the beginning of part 1. And here, a very interesting interaction could occur. When Kakashi unlocks his Mangekyo Sharingan and uses it for the first time, Kushina would see it. That swirling whirlpool going into a single point in the middle of itself. That warping effect, that teleportation. It had become all too familiar to Kushina that night almost 12 years ago. Her eyes widen. Suddenly, she's hit with a flashback, almost akin to a form of PTSD. Kushina collapses to the ground. Cold sweat covers her face. The others rush over to see what happened, worried if she's okay and if Kakashi's Mangekyo somehow affected her negatively. Kushina recollects herself somewhat, apologizing for making everyone worry. Then she utters 3 simple words. The Masked Man. Everyone is confused, but Kushina then explains further. As all of them already know, 12 years ago, the Masked Man who attacked Konoha had a space-time ninjutsu that surpassed even Minato's. It looked almost exactly like what Kakashi had just done. In the days after that incident, most people who were present when it happened wouldn't think too much of it. Just a coincidence, right? But Kakashi's mind would be overflowing with thoughts. A Sharingan power that looked the same as his was used to kill his master and harm Konoha. A Sharingan power that looked exactly like his own Sharingan's ability. A Sharingan he got from Obito. He'd obviously bring this up to Kushina and the rest of the Konoha higher-ups. Kushina could then confirm that the Masked Man's Sharingan was in the opposite eye to Kakashi's, further providing proof that Obito may actually be the Masked Man. How Obito survived and how he turned to the dark side would remain a mystery, but for the most part, Konoha would now have an idea of who the Masked Man might be. This would further remove suspicions from the Uchiha clan. But moving away from Konoha, let's talk about the Akatsuki. Obito, Zetsu, Pain, Konan, Kakuzu, Sasori, Kisame, Deidara, and Hidan remain untouched. But 3 major differences occur. 1. Itachi is obviously not a part of Akatsuki. This is a pretty big blow, seeing as he was one of the strongest members. 2. Orochimaru doesn't leave the Akatsuki because there's no Itachi to drive him out. He'd probably become partners with Kisame. That sounds like a fun duo, I'm not gonna lie. But the Akatsuki was originally supposed to have 10 members until Orochimaru left. With Itachi never joining the group, someone else would probably be recruited. As for who that might be, I'll save that reveal for later. So let's recap everything. Kushina is alive and training to someday control the Nine Tails. The Uchiha clan does not revolt, meaning that Itachi, Shisui, and Fugaku are alive and well in Konoha and all grow stronger than they were in canon, with arguably the exception of Itachi since he wouldn't have his Mangekyo. Kakashi and Gai grow much stronger, Jiraiya is around the village a lot more and probably grows stronger too, possibly taking the time to master Sage Mode to its fullest to keep up with everyone else. Naruto, Sasuke, and Lee all become rivals and form a good brotherly bond. They're all much stronger and more skilled than in canon. Naruto and Sasuke grow up in much better conditions. Naruto is in the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, Itachi never joins the Akatsuki, Orochimaru remains in the Akatsuki, and by extension has more resources to fuel his experiments, possibly getting some of the other members involved as well. A new mystery Akatsuki member joins the organization, and most of the rest of the world stays the same for now. I think this can all be summed up in 3 words. Konoha is... But yeah, that was it for this video. If you enjoyed it, then please make sure to leave a like. It would really tell me that you like the video and would basically give me more motivation to do the next part. I guess that's how you could say it. So yeah, have a nice day, see you next time, goodbye.